In a previous video, I promised I would get into a little bit of music theory, so I'm going to take you through kind of the thought process I use whenever I'm writing a track, and use some basic music theory fundamentals to help me piece together some notes, right? How do you know which notes to play in your song? So hopefully this helps you. Okay, that's enough of that. All right, let's get into some theory. All right, so I added some basic vocals to this track, and then I started to build a bass line for it. So if I go through these clips, right here is when my vocals start to come in. Right, and then around this point is where I added my bass. What is the total and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. So okay, so let's figure out the right notes to play based on this. Right, so I'm gonna sample or solo on that sound, and then I'm gonna use my bass to start building some notes that I could play along with this vocal track. So again, I selected this clip, Control D, and in this, you can see I have a bass line here. And if I were to just kind of narrow this loop in, what is the total and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. What is the total? Okay, so that doesn't sound like my first note, which is right here, right? So this window's a little hard to work in because I got too many things going on, but I'll try to make this a little bit easier to see. So I'm going to take this clip, and I'm just going to enter it down here, and then take the bass track that I'm working on, and then I'm going to narrow in on the first note of the vocal. Okay, so I think that sounds like D. I still can't really tell because my voice is so out of tune. But let's start with D. Okay, so how do you know what note to play next? So if I look up church modes in Google and I go to this music theory fundamental site, It starts off with Ionian. If you want to learn what Ionian is, go look it up. But if you're learning music theory, just at a very high level, there's something called modes. And modes are just a way of organizing your notes onto some type of a scale or pattern. And Ionian just happens to be one of those patterns. So if you've ever been sitting in front of a keyboard and you were to play the white notes, starting at C, for example, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, right? All the white notes, you would be playing the Ionian scale, right? And the way that you would know that is by taking these letters here that represent whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, right? So starting on the first scale, this mode is the same as the major scale. Major scale. Right, so all these different terms might be a little bit confusing. But really, how do I use this in my track? Right? If that's my starting note, how do I take Ionian and apply it to my keyboard? So the first thing you have to know is that Ionian is telling you that if you want to use this scale, the first thing you have to do is pick a note. So I did that. That's your starting note. And then from that note, you're going to step up the keyboard one whole step. So what that means is one whole step is from this white key to this white key. Right? So the reason this is a whole step, actually I don't really know the reason. I know that this would be a half step, right? You're going from this note to this note, which is a smaller transition between two different frequencies. This being the first one, this be a second one. So that would be a half note. But if you make this full step to E, you're making a whole note transition to the next note. Okay, so that's what this W represents, is make a whole note transition. Right, and then it says do it again, make another one. So I made my first whole note transition from D to E. And then I make another whole note transition. So is that this note? Or is it this note? Well, the answer is it's this one, right? These two, if you're transitioning from this key to this key, if it's the immediate next key, then it's a half step or a half note. If you're skipping one key, then it's a whole note, right? So I went from here to here is a W, and from here to here is another W. And then it says do a half note. So we went whole, whole, and then it says half. Okay, so now I'm starting to get some notes that I can use in my song with this particular vocal. And I just happen to be using the Ionian mode, right? And it's playing a major scale. So what you're hearing right now is the scale of D major, right? If I started with D, that's my root note. And if I'm using the Ionian scale, I'm basically playing notes that are in the key of D major. Okay? Right. Half note, whole note, whole, half, and then it says do another whole, half. So let's finish that. So from here to here is a whole note, from here to here is a whole note, from here to here is a half note, and then it says whole, Right. Whole, whole, half. Whole, 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 half. Whole, whole, half. Whole, 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 half. Great, I finished my scale. This is the entire D major scale. You know that it's complete because you started on D and you ended on D, right? Okay, I kind of like that. So let's change this and call it D major. It's a pretty happy progression, right? But what if I wanted to do something else, right? So let's try the next one, Dorian. So I'm going to copy my D major clip, select it, Control D, and it's duplicated now. And we're going to call this one D Dorian. Actually, to make this obvious, we should call this D Ionian. And then our next clip will be D Dorian. All right, so if we look at Dorian, Dorian scale is whole half. So let's change that. Starting at D, whole half, right? And then it says whole, whole, whole. Whole, half, whole, whole, whole. Great. Half, whole. Half, whole. You're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. World is so total and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. World is so total and you're feeling alone. Right, so it sounds different. We changed this note. World is so total and you're feeling alone. See. Sounds a little creepy. Definitely not as happy as D Ionian. World is so total and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. World is so total and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. All right, well, I kind of like it, but it sounds a bit off. Let's try Phrygian. So let's take our clip, Control D, and let's name this one D Phrygian. Did I spell that right? P-H-R-Y. Where are we at? Why didn't that work? P-H-R. Phrygian. Boom. All right. Phrygian is a half note. Starts the loop. So we'll go from our root note D and up a half note. Right? Half note, whole, whole, whole. Half note, whole, whole, whole. Half note, whole, whole. So it's half note, whole, whole, whole. Half note, whole, whole. World is so cold, and you're feeling alone, and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. World is so cold, and you're feeling alone, and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. Okay, I like that too, but it definitely sounds darker. And if we look at the description of Phrygian, begins on the 3rd scale degree of the major scale. 3rd scale degree. What the heck? And then the naturally occurring half steps are between the 1st, 2nd, and 5th and 6th scale degrees. All of that is just so confusing. You really need to learn more about music theory before you can understand that specifically. But, as you can see, I didn't have to teach you any of that. All you had to know is how to apply this scale to your piano roll and to pick a root note that sounds similar to what you were singing. That doesn't look good. Yeah, go away. Okay. Again, we started off with Ionian. It sounds happier. Once we get into Dorian and Phrygian, definitely darker sounding. We'll do one more. Lydian. D. Lydian. And D Lydian is 3 whole notes. Click on your Lydian. Right? Skip, skip, skip. Whole, whole, whole. Whole, whole, whole. Half. So it's whole, 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 half. Whole, whole, half, I think. 3 holes and a half, 2 holes and a half. 3 holes and a half, 2 holes and a half. World is so cold, and you're feeling alone, and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. World is so cold, and you're feeling alone, and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. So all of that sounds good except for this G sharp. World is so cold, and you're feeling alone. Right? So I would definitely not pick D Lydian to apply to whatever notes that I'm singing in that clip. So as you're starting to select your notes, just keep a mental note that G sharp is probably not something that's going to sound good when you're building your loops. World is so cold, and you're feeling alone, and you don't know. A sounds good. World is so cold, and you're feeling alone, and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. Right? I really like these notes. I like all these notes except for G sharp. All right. So we did D Lydian, we did D Phrygian, we did Dorian, and we did Ionian. Let's play Ionian again. World is so cold, and you're feeling alone, and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. World is so cold, and you're feeling alone, and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. Okay, now that I listen to it again, it definitely adds a different feel to it. The more I listen to it, the more wrong it doesn't sound, or the more right it sounds. So when you're making your notes, technically there are no wrong or right notes. You can use them in various ways to make them sound how you want them to sound. But if you're just trying to go by the book music theory, then you can use this as a starting point to find notes that might work for you, right? So I'm going to take these notes now that I have them, and I'm going to potentially build some chords off of them. Okay, so let's start with D Ionian, and then insert a MIDI track. And then I'm just going to, actually, why don't we do one of Ableton's out-of-the-box instruments? How about not a sampler, an analog pad. How about that? And that sounds like... Why not? All right. And then I'm just going to take this and Control-C copy it, and then Control-V paste it. Let's build some chords. All right, so I'm going to open my, let's change this to chords so I'm making this obvious. All right, and we're going to make chords in the scale of D major, right? We're using the notes that we picked from Ionian, and all I did was copy that over into a new instrument. And now I'm going to make some chords. So what is a chord? A chord is two notes put together. That's all it is. And I already know which notes I can use, so why don't I just pick this note, right? Because this note we know sounds okay. So let's listen to what that sounds like. Let's do another chord. You're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide. World is so cold and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide. Don't know where to hide. Let's do three notes now. So how about this one, and this one? Right, because we know that B is alright to use. Let's do another one. So we know that D is okay. What else? What about down here? How do we know what notes to play down here? Right, well, everything down here is the exact same thing as up here. So let's take, how about C sharp? So let's find C sharp down here. Well, there's C, so then C sharp is just right above it. Let's find another note down here. How about G? No, how about E? All right, there's E. Okay, another way that you can do this is by entering note E, selecting it, and then hitting Shift, the Shift key, and the down arrow. That'll send it all the way an octave down. What's an octave? Look it up. It's basically just shifting this entire note structure into the lower octave, the lower sequence of notes. World is so cold and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide. Don't know where to hide. Can I use A sharp? Nope, but I can use A. Where's A? There's A. I'm using this, so as you move your cursor up and down, you can see that it tells you on the left-hand side what note you're hovering over. And you can just double click and enter notes wherever you want to.
World is so cold and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. World is so cold and you're feeling alone.
Right. Now let's add some drums.
World is so cold and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide. World is so cold and you're feeling alone and you don't know where to hide, don't know where to hide.
Cool. All right, now we can add some. How about we do this? Let's select these notes and hit Control D. Right, so that just duplicated all those notes that I selected. I'm going to move them over here so that they're on top of these notes, and then shift down. Right, and now I have those exact same notes in a lower octave. And it's just going to add more flavor to the chords that I'm using. Let's add some in-between notes. This sounds very choppy, right? It's very predictable. So let's add some in-between notes to kind of add a little bit of flavor or variation to the chords that we're playing, using all of the exact same notes, right? D, E, F, G, A, B, C sharp, D. So let's pick some in-between notes. So let's go. Hear that in there? Some other things that you can do here is add some different playing style to the chords. So if you go into your MIDI effects and you open up the arpeggiator, can change this instrument to something else if you wanted to. Or you can add in some other audio effects on top of it. So how about, let's do an auto pan. And just focus in on this one.
What is it for? Don't let you. What is it for? Don't let you feel alone. And you don't know where to hide. Don't know where to hide. What is it for? Don't let you feel alone. And you don't know where to hide. Don't know where to hide. What is it for? Don't let you feel alone. And you don't know where to hide. Don't know where to hide. What is it for? You're feeling alone. You don't know where to
There you go. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, like and subscribe, and continue to watch my 100-part series of the building of resignation. Anyway, ciao.